July 2nd, 1937. Somewhere above the endless blue of the Pacific Ocean, a voice crackles through static.
We are on the line 157, 337. We will repeat this message. We are running north and south.
And then, silence. No mayday, no signal, no trace. That voice belonged to Amelia Earhart, one of the most famous women on Earth. And those were the last words the world would ever hear from her. She vanished into thin air, with her navigator Fred Noonan, her plane, and perhaps the truth. For over 8 decades, her disappearance has remained one of history's greatest mysteries. A story of courage, ambition, and a journey that ended somewhere between the clouds and the unknown. Was it a simple crash in the open ocean? A government cover-up? A secret mission gone wrong? Or something far more mysterious, something they never wanted us to know? Tonight, on Mystery Fact File, we're diving deep into the case that refuses to die, the vanishing of Amelia Earhart. Because sometimes the sky doesn't just take people, it takes their secrets too. Before she became the world's most famous missing person, Amelia Mary Earhart was a restless soul chasing the horizon. Born in 1897 in Atchison, Kansas, she was anything but ordinary. In a time when women were told to stay grounded, she looked up. By the age of 10, she was already collecting newspaper clippings of female achievers, long before Aviation pioneer would be added to her name. The world first noticed her in 1928. Amelia became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic, though as a passenger. But that wasn't enough for her. She wanted to fly herself, to prove that women could conquer the same skies as men. 4 years later, in 1932, she did it, solo across the Atlantic. In a single-engine Lockheed Vega, battling mechanical failures, freezing winds, and exhaustion. When she landed in Ireland, muddy and shaking, she had just made history.
After midnight, the sky over the Atlantic was terribly black. I saw lightning all around me, but I thought, I can't quit now.
Her courage made her a global icon. She wasn't just a pilot, she was a symbol. Newspapers called her Lady Lindy, after Charles Lindbergh. But Amelia wasn't interested in being anyone's version of anyone. She was writing her own legend. The 1930s were an age of flight, of breaking records and breaking limits. For Amelia, the next step wasn't about fame. It was about the ultimate challenge, to circumnavigate the globe, to fly around the world. It would be the longest, most dangerous flight ever attempted by a woman, and it would take her across 29,000 miles of uncharted skies. In 1936, she received her new aircraft, a sleek, twin-engine Lockheed Electra 10E, nicknamed the Flying Laboratory. She called it My Last Great Adventure. Amelia wasn't alone. Her navigator, Fred Noonan, was one of the best in the business, an expert in celestial navigation who had charted routes across the Pacific for Pan Am Airways. Together, they planned to take off from Oakland, California, fly eastward through South America, Africa, Asia, and finally cross the Pacific back to the U.S. It was ambitious, it was dangerous, and it was exactly the kind of challenge Amelia Earhart lived for. By June 1937, after one failed attempt, the world watched as Amelia and Fred began their journey, this time flying east to west. They flew across the Atlantic again, then down through Africa, over the jungles of Southeast Asia, and finally reached Lae, New Guinea on July 1st. At that point, they had completed 22,000 miles, and only 7,000 remained. But those final miles were the most dangerous of all. Their next destination, Howland Island, a tiny speck of land barely 2 miles long, somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. To guide them there, the U.S. Coast Guard ship Itasca waited with radio contact and signal flares. Amelia's Electra took off from Leh at 10 a.m. July 2nd. Fuel tanks full. Weather reports clear, morale high. It should have been a routine flight. But over the next 20 hours, something went terribly wrong.
We are about 200 miles out. We must be on you but cannot see you. Gas is running low.
The Itasca replied again and again, but Amelia couldn't hear them. Her voice grew fainter, then nothing. No distress signal, no trace, only the endless silence of the Pacific. By the next morning, the world's most famous pilot had disappeared. The U.S. Navy launched one of the largest search efforts in history, spanning over 250,000 square miles of ocean. Planes and ships scoured the seas for weeks, but there was no wreckage, no oil slick, no body. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan had simply vanished. Even Franklin D. Roosevelt ordered the Navy to leave no stone unturned. But after 16 days, the official search was called off. The official story: she ran out of fuel and crashed somewhere in the Pacific. Case closed. Or was it? Because for decades after her disappearance, radio operators claimed to pick up faint, desperate distress calls, believed to be from Amelia herself.
This is Amelia Earhart. We are on land. Help us.
The coordinates never matched. The signals were dismissed. But some believed she survived the crash and was stranded on a remote island, waiting for rescue that never came. Others say she was captured, or that her final flight wasn't what it seemed at all. The truth of what happened on that flight may not lie in the ocean, but in the shadows of politics, war, and secrets buried long before radar ever touched the sky. Because what if Amelia Earhart's disappearance wasn't an accident? When Amelia Earhart vanished, the world froze. It was as if the sky itself had swallowed her whole. Newspapers across the globe screamed the same headline: Amelia Earhart missing. The golden age of aviation had just met its darkest moment. The U.S. Navy immediately deployed ships and aircraft to comb the Pacific. The battleship USS Colorado, the carrier USS Lexington. Even local islanders joined the search, scanning the endless waves for any sign: a wingtip, a life raft, a floating shoe. But the Pacific was merciless. The area they had to search was massive, over 250,000 square miles, an ocean the size of Texas, filled with nothing but blue. For 16 exhausting days, the search continued. Planes flew in grid patterns, men peered through binoculars, radio towers stayed alive 24 hours a day. And then, nothing. No wreckage, no distress flare, no transmission. All they found was silence, and the silence began to grow louder than any radio could ever broadcast. When the search was finally called off, President Franklin D. Roosevelt made a statement, calling Amelia a national hero and offering condolences to her husband, George Putnam. But privately, not everyone believed the official story. Even as the Navy retreated, strange radio reports began to surface across the Pacific. Amateur operators, from Florida to California, claimed to hear faint SOS messages, female voices calling out through the static.
Cot calling Itasca. We are on land. We are safe. Help us.
Could it really be Amelia? Some of the signals were triangulated to remote islands, hundreds of miles from Howland. But each time the signal faded before anyone could locate the source. Many dismissed them as hoaxes or atmospheric interference. But others swore they heard her voice. Frightened, calm, but alive. In the years that followed, these whispers became legend. A desperate voice trapped between frequencies, calling out from the edge of nowhere. In 1938, 1 year after she vanished, the U.S. Navy sent another expedition to the Phoenix Islands to investigate the theory that she might have crash-landed on a nearby atoll called Gardner Island, now known as Nikumaroro. They found nothing conclusive, just empty beaches, coral, and silence. But decades later, archaeologists would return and uncover something strange. Fragments of aluminum, a woman's shoe, a compact mirror, and even, in 1940, partial human bones, later lost by British colonial officers. Could those have belonged to Amelia Earhart? Or was it all just coincidence? The evidence was tantalizing, but never enough to solve the riddle. For years, the crash and sink theory remained the simplest explanation. She ran out of fuel, lost her bearings, and went down somewhere near Howland Island. But if it were that simple, why has no one ever found her plane? The Lockheed Electra was made of metal. It should have left debris, an oil slick, something. Yet, not a single verified piece of wreckage has ever been recovered from the Pacific floor. Even today, with advanced sonar and deep-sea mapping, the ocean has kept its secret. Maybe the Pacific isn't just deep in water. Maybe it's deep in stories we aren't supposed to tell. If history couldn't explain it, then mystery would. After the search ended, the world began to fill the silence with questions, and soon with theories. The simplest one was the crash and sink. Amelia simply ran out of gas and ditched at sea. Her plane sank, and the Pacific erased the evidence. But even early on, not everyone bought that story. Fred Gerner, a CBS journalist in the 1960s, claimed to have uncovered classified reports suggesting something far more complicated. He proposed that Amelia Earhart's final flight wasn't just an adventure, it was a mission. The 1930s weren't just about flight records. They were the years leading up to World War II. The Pacific was on edge, the Japanese empire expanding, the U.S. keeping a wary eye on its movements. Gerner's theory suggested that Earhart was secretly working with the U.S. government, collecting intelligence on Japanese bases during her world flight. Was Amelia Earhart a spy? It sounds far-fetched, but there were clues. Her route across the Pacific passed dangerously close to Japanese-held territories. Her aircraft had been modified, radio equipment added, the fuselage reinforced. Officially, these were research upgrades, but some believed they had a different purpose. Then there was the Marshall Islands theory. According to dozens of local islanders and later testimonies, a strange silver plane crash-landed near Mili Atoll, hundreds of miles north of Howland, right in Japanese-controlled waters. Witnesses claimed a woman and a man were taken prisoner by Japanese soldiers. One described the woman as tall, with short hair, and wearing trousers. Some said she was taken to Saipan, interrogated, and later died in captivity. Others say she lived under a new identity after the war, hidden in plain sight. None of it has ever been proven. But in 1944, U.S. Marines who captured Saipan claimed they found evidence of a civilian aircraft and personal items matching Amelia's description. The reports vanished, sealed, redacted, or simply ignored. Was it just wartime confusion, or an effort to keep the truth buried? Then came another theory, one that crossed from strange to almost impossible. Some researchers suggested Amelia may have landed, or crashed, on Nikumaroro Island and survived for a time. Broadcasting those faint SOS calls picked up days after her disappearance. The island was uninhabited, surrounded by sharp coral reefs, but close enough to Howland that a missed bearing could have led her straight to it. In 1940, British officers discovered partial remains, bones believed to be those of a woman, alongside a sextant box and a fragment of an aircraft. But the bones were lost in transit, and later DNA testing, decades afterward, was inconclusive. Still, the Nikumaroro hypothesis remains one of the most compelling. The image of Amelia, stranded on a lonely coral atoll, waiting for rescue that never came. The idea is haunting that the most famous pilot in the world died not in the sky, but beneath a burning Pacific sun, looking out across an empty horizon. Of course, there are others who go even further. Those who believe Amelia's disappearance wasn't of this Earth. The UFO theory. It claims that strange lights were reported in the skies over the Pacific that same night. Some even say she was taken, that her aircraft vanished not into water, but into thin air. Impossible? Maybe. But remember, even the possible hasn't been proven either. Through the decades, new expeditions have tried to find the truth. Sonar scans, deep-sea robots, forensic reanalysis of old bones. Every few years, someone claims they've found the wreckage, a shape in the sonar data, a photo of the ocean floor. But each time, hope fades. The Pacific keeps its secrets. To this day, the Electra's final resting place remains undiscovered. And the question lingers, was it fate or was it design? Narrator, slower, softer. What makes Amelia Earhart's story so haunting isn't just that she vanished, it's that she vanished at the height of her glory. A woman who dared to go farther than anyone said she could, only to disappear in a way no one could explain. Her name became legend. Her face became a symbol. And her story became a mirror for our own fascination with the unknown. Because deep down, every mystery we chase isn't really about finding answers. It's about understanding how far we'll go to look for them. Before she was a mystery, Amelia Earhart was a revolution. Born in 1897 in Atchison, Kansas, she grew up climbing trees, firing slingshots, and dreaming of flight long before airplanes became common. She wasn't supposed to become a pilot. Women didn't do that, not in her time. But Amelia had that strange spark, that restlessness that refused to fade. She once said,
Adventure is worthwhile in itself.
it wasn't about glory or records. It was about the urge to go, to test the edges of what was possible. In 1928, she became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic, though only as a passenger. Still, the world took notice, and 4 years later, she did it again, this time solo. She crossed the ocean alone, facing icy winds, a failing altimeter, and exhaustion that could have killed her. When she landed in Ireland after 15 hours, the first farmer she met asked where she'd come from. She smiled and said simply,
From America.
That's who she was, quiet, determined, unstoppable. To a generation of women in the 1930s, Amelia wasn't just a pilot, she was proof. Proof that barriers could be broken. She lectured about aviation, founded the 99s, a group supporting female pilots, and became one of the most recognizable faces in America. But fame never seemed to interest her. She used it as a tool to push the world forward. When she announced her plan to fly around the world in 1937, people called her crazy, too dangerous, too ambitious. But that was exactly why she had to do it. Her plane, the Lockheed Model 10 Electra, was cutting edge for its time, a silver twin-engine machine gleaming with promise. It wasn't just about aviation anymore, it was about history. She would be the first woman to circle the globe, a flight of over 29,000 miles. Every stop along the way would be a test of courage, of technology, of willpower. By July 1937, Amelia and her navigator, Fred Noonan, had already completed 22,000 miles. They had crossed Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and Australia. All that remained were the Pacific Islands, the hardest leg of the journey. The distance from Lae, New Guinea to Howland Island was just 2,500 miles. But those 2,100 miles would become the most mysterious stretch of sky in modern history. Amelia's last confirmed message to the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca was short.
We are on line 157-337. We will repeat this message. We are running north and south.
Then, silence. No one heard from her again. That was the moment she stopped being a record breaker and became an unsolved mystery. It's easy to forget that before the theories, the legends, the documentaries, there was a real woman in that cockpit. A heartbeat, a dream, and a single belief that the world was meant to be explored. And maybe that's why her disappearance still grips us so deeply, because it wasn't supposed to end like this. The woman who conquered the sky wasn't meant to vanish into it. Nearly 90 years have passed since that morning over the Pacific, and still we ask the same question. What happened to Amelia Earhart? For every theory, there's a shadow. For every clue, there's a contradiction. Some believe she died at sea, her plane resting quietly on the ocean floor. Others say she survived, imprisoned, or hidden, living out her life under a different name. And then there are those who believe her story was rewritten, a convenient cover for something much larger, something the world wasn't ready to know. But maybe the truth isn't just in the facts we find. Maybe it's in the questions she left behind. Why were her radio logs incomplete? Why were her last coordinates off by dozens of miles? And why did so many reports, from islanders, soldiers, and explorers, vanish from official archives? Every time one mystery is solved, another emerges. It's almost as if the Pacific itself refuses to give her back. But perhaps that's fitting, because Amelia Earhart was never just about answers. She was about possibility. The courage to go farther than anyone thought a woman could. The will to face uncertainty, not as a barrier, but as a horizon. In her last letter to her husband, she wrote,
Please know I'm quite aware of the hazards. I want to do it because I want to do it. Women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be but a challenge to others.
It wasn't a goodbye. It was a statement of belief. A belief that even in failure, even in mystery, there is meaning. Maybe that's why her story endures. Because somewhere out there, under miles of ocean or on a forgotten shore, her legacy still drifts, not in pieces of metal, but in the echoes of what she dared to do. For every young girl who dreams of the sky, for every person who chooses courage over comfort, Amelia Earhart still flies. She lives not in the wreckage, but in the wonder she left behind. And so, we return to the same question we began with. How does someone so famous simply disappear? Maybe the answer is that she never did. Because as long as we keep searching, as long as her name is whispered with awe, as long as we look up and wonder, Amelia Earhart hasn't vanished. She's still out there. Somewhere between the clouds and the stars, waiting for us to catch up. This is Mystery Fact File, and the sky still keeps its secrets.